Nice to meet you, Gold and Silver TV. Now we hear the sound of spring coming. Today, we will talk about gravity that affects our lives. I will start with the theme of God's gravity, which is invisible but has a huge impact on human senile life. The expression, gravity of God, can be interpreted in a theological, philosophical, or metaphorical sense. We can think of several possibilities. Simply put, it can be seen as God's pulling force. Even in our daily lives, we always choose all actions according to the law of attraction. Just as gravity pulls objects, it can mean the power of God to pull humans into His own love and grace. For example, in John chapter 644, Jesus said, "No one can come to me unless the Father, who sent me, leads me." This can be interpreted as meaning that there is a power that God spiritually pulls people. In this way, the Bible represents God as the source of space and order. I'm not giving this lecture to emphasize any religion. However, since our lives are precious, I think it's very meaningful to think deeply about them once. This is because we don't unconditionally follow the coercion or call of others, but we think our own judgments and insights are important. Just as physical gravity is an important force in maintaining the universe, it can be seen as the concept that God is maintaining the order of all things in the universe. Even in the Bible, God creates and maintains everything. Colossians 1:17. And this word can be applied not only to the physical world, but also to the spiritual order. If you look closely, everything in the world is in order. What are the laws and influences of God? Just as gravity is an inevitable universal force, God's will and laws can also be seen as an inevitable fundamental force in human life. In other words, whether humans believe in God or not, it can mean that God's existence and providence affect all parts of life. God is the spiritual center. Just as gravity pulls all objects around, it can also be interpreted that God should be the center of spiritual life. It may be a message that it is important to put God at the center, as you first seek His country and His righteousness, in Matthew chapter 63. In any sense,
It's very common
God's
among
gravity
highly creative
could be a
people,
beautiful
both
concept
artists
that
and
expresses
scientists. And our
God's invisible and powerful influence on humans and the world. Where have you seen this expression? Or are you curious about it in a particular context? In fact, why can't people understand the gravity of God? There can be many reasons why people do not understand God's gravity. The power and influence that God attracts. 1. Because you can't see it. Gravity is a force that pulls things, even though we cannot see it directly. Likewise, God's existence and history are not physically visible, so people tend to be unable to recognize or deny it easily. Believe is the reality of the things you wish for, and the evidence of the things you don't see. Hebrews 111. 2. An egocentric way of thinking. Many people think that they are independent and autonomous, and believe that they can live enough without God. The modern society's emphasis on the "I am the master" mindset makes it impossible to feel the existence and history of God. To be foolish for being wise in one's own right. Rome 122. 3. World values and materialism. Modern society focuses on science, economy, and technological development, and values materiality more than spiritual. People often neglect their relationship with God in pursuit of immediate success and pleasure. The thoughts of the body become enemies with God. Not only do they not give in to God's law, but they cannot. Rome 87. 4. Sin and depraved nature. According to the Bible, human beings are spiritually blinded by sin. So they do not easily realize the existence and guidance of God. Sin makes human beings move away from God. As if in an attempt not to be affected by gravity. The hearts of these people have become stubborn, and their ears are dull to hear. And their eyes are closed. Matthew chapter 1315. 5. A misunderstanding of hardship and injustice. Looking at the suffering and injustice that exists in the world, many people question if God exists. Why does this happen? You don't understand the meaning of hardship, and you feel as if there is no God. However, the Bible says that God grows and tests us, and eventually leads us on a good path. My thoughts are different from yours, and my path is different from yours. Isaiah chapter 558. 6. Refusing to call from God. God calls people, but they also reject God's call because they have free will. Jesus also said that people reject God's love. How many times have I tried to gather you, but you did not want to? Matthew chapter 2337. Nevertheless, God keeps pulling. Just as denying gravity does not mean that gravity disappears, God's call continues. Even if people reject and do not understand God, each person only has different times to realize God. And some discover God through deep contemplation and exploration. Others through love and dedication of others. After all, to understand God's gravity, it is necessary to open your spiritual eyes. Lay down your pride, and try to find God with a humble heart. Through this, we can realize God's guidance more deeply and discover true peace and meaning. After all, God's gravity is an important concept that deeply understands our lives and makes us look back on ourselves, even if we can't see it with our eyes and touch it with our hands. If you open your heart and accept the invisible deep truth, you can feel the attraction of God. Just as rejecting gravity doesn't eliminate it. Even if we don't recognize God's love, sometimes refusing doesn't go away. What's important is that we should be humble. It's a willingness to understand and accept the attraction. God always draws us to the center. In the heart of it, we can find true peace and meaning. So stop for a moment and think about what's driving us the way we are. And what kind of power is flowing at the center of it. God's gravity is always by our side. How do I feel gravity firmly and know how to go in the good direction? It's a really important question. To feel the gravity of God better and to go in the good direction. First, it is necessary to open your mind. There should be an intention to pause and focus on God, even in the midst of daily busyness. Second, take time to socialize with God through prayer and meditation. This is the first step toward God. Third, read the Bible and try to understand God's will and love deeply. In the words, we can discover the heart of God. Fourth, experience God's love. Through the practice of loving and serving the people around you. Love is an amazing way to embody God's character. Lastly, live your life in a humble manner. Humility is an important attitude that deepens the relationship with God. Through these 5 things, we can feel God's gravity more clearly. In our small efforts to open our hearts and become close to God, you will realize how powerful and warm God's pull is. God is always there for you. What matters is our will to reach Him. After all, God's gravity is the invisible power of love and grace that we can feel every moment. We may not fully understand this, but the important thing is to acknowledge and accept it. God always leads us on a good path, and He keeps us at the center so that we are not shaken. Open the door of your heart, engage in prayer and meditation, and go to God. Exploring His will in the words of the Bible, serving those around Him with love, living a day in a humble position. These 5 things. It's an important way to feel God's attraction more clearly. If you listen to His call and step forward in times of need, God's gravity will lead us to full peace and meaning. God is always by His side. What we need to do is start making a small effort to get closer to Him. Viewers, thank you so much for watching so far. Subscribe and like. Notification settings are a big boost to video production.